The rain tapped gently against the bedroom window, a soft but steady rhythm that filled the silence inside 13-year-old Liam's room. He sat cross-legged on the floor, arms wrapped around a worn-out pillow, staring at the faded photo in his hand. It was a picture of him and his dad taken years ago on a sunny day at the beach. Liam perched high on his father's shoulders, both of them grinning from ear to ear. Back then, everything was different. Back then, his dad laughed more, played more, was there more. But now it felt like the man in that picture was just a memory. Liam's mother had died 2 years ago in a car accident, and ever since, it was as if the color had drained from their world. His father, Mason, once a playful and energetic man who made Saturday mornings magical with pancake towers and cartoon voices, had turned into someone Liam barely recognized. Quiet, withdrawn, and always working. Mason had taken on extra hours at his job to support them, leaving the house early in the morning and returning late at night. Liam understood, or at least he tried to. He knew his father was doing his best to keep things afloat, but deep down, he missed the version of his dad who used to wrestle him in the backyard, who told made-up bedtime stories about talking animals and brave knights, and who never missed a single event at school. That dad hadn't been around in a long time, and tonight was supposed to be different, or so Liam thought. It had been the school's annual fall play, and Liam had landed a lead role for the very first time. He had practiced for weeks, memorizing lines, rehearsing every movement, hoping, no, believing, his dad would be in the audience cheering him on. Mason had promised he would come. He had said, "Nothing's going to stop me this time, champ. I'll be there in the front row." Those words had lit a fire in Liam's heart. For days, he counted down to the play, imagining his dad clapping loudest, maybe even standing up to cheer when the curtain closed. But when the show finally began and Liam peeked through the velvet curtain to look out into the sea of faces, the one he wanted to see most wasn't there. The seat marked, reserved for Mr. Mason Walters, remained empty the entire night. Liam delivered his lines with a tight knot in his chest, his voice wobbling slightly whenever he glanced toward the vacant seat. The applause at the end felt hollow. Other kids were embraced by their parents, showered with hugs and flowers. Liam smiled politely at his teacher and walked home alone under a dark sky, his backpack feeling heavier with every step. When he opened the front door, the warm scent of coffee filled the house. His father sat at the kitchen table, typing furiously on his laptop, surrounded by spreadsheets and papers. "Hey, champ," Mason said, not looking up. "How was the play?" Liam didn't answer at first. He closed the door quietly, then dropped his bag by the stairs and walked toward the table. "You didn't come," he said softly. "I know. I'm so sorry, buddy," Mason replied, rubbing his forehead. "Something came up at work. I couldn't get away in time. But I'll make it up to you, I promise. You always say that." Liam's voice cracked. He turned and climbed the stairs without another word. In his room, he sank onto the bed, holding the old beach photo to his chest. He felt something warm trickle down his cheek and wiped it away quickly. He wasn't a little kid anymore. He wasn't supposed to cry over stuff like this. But no matter how hard he tried to be mature, the disappointment was too sharp, too deep. He reached for a notebook from under his bed, a place where he kept doodles, thoughts, and sometimes things he didn't know how to say out loud. Tearing a fresh page, he began to write a letter. He didn't plan to give it to his dad, but somehow, writing the words made him feel less alone. "Dear Dad, I know you're busy. I know things are hard. But I wish you could see how much I need you, not just for money or food or clothes, but for you. I miss the way you used to be. I miss the stories, the jokes, the games. I miss having a dad who saw me, who showed up. Tonight, I looked out at the crowd and you weren't there, again. And it hurt. I'm not mad. I just don't know how many more times I can pretend it doesn't matter. Love, Liam." He folded the letter and tucked it into an envelope, scribbling, "To Dad," on the front. Then he placed it in the top drawer of his desk, unsure whether it would ever see the light of day. After turning off the lamp, he curled under the blanket, eyes still wet, and whispered into the darkness, I miss you, Dad." The house was silent except for the rain outside, tapping its gentle, steady rhythm, like a lullaby for a boy learning that love sometimes hurts, especially when it's silent. Downstairs, Mason sat staring at his computer screen, though he hadn't typed a word in minutes. Something about Liam's face earlier had struck a chord deep inside. He reached into his wallet and found a crumpled sticky note with the date of the play written in Liam's handwriting. The guilt in Mason's chest tightened like a fist. He closed the laptop and sighed, missing the days when he knew how to be his son's hero. The next morning, a strange stillness hung in the air of the Walters home. The clouds had cleared, but the tension between father and son remained. Liam barely spoke during breakfast. He picked at his cereal, nodding without much interest as Mason tried to talk about math tests and school lunches. It wasn't the kind of cold silence that shouted or slammed doors. It was quieter than that, heavier, like something that had been broken too many times to bother trying to fix again. Mason noticed the change in his son, but didn't know how to reach him. He had grown used to solving problems with spreadsheets and email chains, not heart-to-heart conversations. And so, after mumbling a distracted goodbye and handing Liam his lunchbox, he rushed out the door and into the blur of another busy workday, leaving behind a home that felt a little emptier than it had the day before. Later that afternoon, Mason came home early for once. It wasn't intentional. A power outage at the office had sent everyone home. Stepping into the house, he was met with quiet. Liam wasn't home from school yet, so Mason decided to take advantage of the rare spare time and tidy up. As he walked past Liam's room, the door stood slightly ajar. Inside, it looked as though a small tornado had passed through. Papers, sketchbooks, and socks scattered across the floor. With a sigh, Mason stepped in to help organize the mess. He bent down to pick up a stack of books when his elbow accidentally knocked over the top drawer of Liam's desk, spilling its contents onto the floor. As he bent to collect the fallen items, something caught his eye. A small white envelope with the words, "To Dad. Please read," written in Liam's handwriting. Mason stared at it, unsure whether he should open it. But something about the way his name was written, carefully, almost timidly, made him pause. He sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope trembling slightly in his hands, and slowly tore it open. The letter inside was short, but each word landed like a hammer on Mason's heart. "Dear Dad, I know you're busy. I know things are hard, but I wish you could see how much I need you. Not just for money or food or clothes, but for you. I miss the way you used to be. I miss the stories, the jokes, the games. I miss having a dad who saw me, who showed up. Tonight, I looked out at the crowd, and you weren't there. Again, and it hurt. I'm not mad. I just don't know how many more times I can pretend it doesn't matter. Love." Liam. Mason reread the letter over and over again. Each line cracked something open inside him that he hadn't allowed himself to feel for months. Regret, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of failure. He had been so caught up in the role of provider that he had forgotten how to be present. Somewhere in his race to keep everything together, he had let the most important thing slip through his fingers, his son. For the first time in a long while, Mason sat in silence and let the tears come. They rolled down his cheeks, hot and unrelenting, as he realized that Liam's quiet sadness had been speaking volumes, and he had never stopped to listen. When Liam came home that afternoon, he was surprised to find his father waiting for him on the couch, not buried in work or locked in the study. His eyes were red, and the letter was in his hands. "You found it," Liam said quietly, his heart beginning to race. "I did," Mason replied, his voice thick. "And I read it, every word." Liam stood in the doorway, unsure whether to run back outside or sit down. "I didn't mean to upset you," he said, suddenly feeling small. "You didn't upset me," Mason said, getting up and walking over. "You woke me up." Liam looked at him, confused. "I've been asleep, Liam. Not literally, but inside. Ever since your mom passed. I guess I threw myself into work because it felt like the only thing I could control. But I see now that I've been pushing away the one person who needed me most. And I'm so sorry for that." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and real. Mason knelt in front of his son, placing both hands on his shoulders. "I'm not going to pretend I can fix everything overnight," he said. "But I can promise you this. I'm going to try. No more broken promises. I'll be there, Liam. Not just at your events. I'll be there. In your life. Every day." Liam felt a warmth rise in his chest, a flicker of hope that he had almost given up on. He nodded slowly, his throat too tight for words. That night, they didn't eat dinner in silence. They sat at the table together, plates filled with spaghetti and stories from school. Mason laughed for the first time in weeks, and Liam noticed it wasn't forced. They talked about the play, about how nervous Liam had been backstage, and about how funny it was that one of the props had fallen during the performance. It wasn't a perfect dinner, and Mason burned the garlic bread, but it was the kind of night Liam had missed for so long, the kind that felt like home again. Before bed, Mason knocked on Liam's door. He carried a book in his hand, the same one he used to read when Liam was little. "Want a bedtime story?" he asked. Liam grinned. "I thought I was too old for those." "Maybe," Mason said, smiling. "But I don't think you ever outgrow being loved." Liam nodded, pulling back his blanket. "Okay, one story." As Mason read aloud, his voice calm and steady, Liam felt a comfort he hadn't felt in ages. The words of the story faded into the background, replaced by the sound of his father's voice, steady and warm, anchoring him back to a world where love was still real and promises could still be kept. And just before he drifted off to sleep, Liam whispered, "Thanks for reading the letter, Dad." Mason leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Thank you for writing it." Saturday arrived with the golden promise of sunshine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Liam awoke to the scent of sizzling bacon and the unmistakable sound of music drifting from the kitchen. His dad was playing the old rock playlist they used to dance to during weekend mornings. Blinking sleep from his eyes, Liam sat up in bed, momentarily unsure if he was dreaming. But no, this wasn't a dream. This was real. The transformation in his father had been slow but sincere, and it had started with a letter. A simple piece of paper filled with a boy's broken heart and unspoken hope. Over the past 2 weeks, Mason had not only begun coming home early from work, but he had also started showing up in ways that mattered. They now had dinner together, watched a few episodes of their favorite superhero show in the evenings, and even worked on a jigsaw puzzle that spanned half the coffee table. But today felt different. Today, Mason had declared it was going to be their first official Dad Day. Liam padded into the kitchen to find Mason, wearing a ridiculous apron that read, "Master Chef of the Galaxy," flipping bacon and humming to the beat of a Queen song. The kitchen counter was lined with ingredients: eggs, toast, orange juice, and a bowl of fruit that had somehow already been chopped into neat, colorful cubes. "You're cooking?" Liam asked, rubbing his eyes. "I am indeed," Mason said with a proud grin. "No frozen waffles today. This is the start of something new. Dad Days. Remember?" Liam's lips twitched upward. "So what's the plan?" "Well," Mason said, setting 2 plates on the table, "I figured we could go to the park, toss the football around, maybe get ice cream, double scoops, and then head to the arcade. I even found that old air hockey game you used to love." Liam blinked, stunned. "You really planned all that?" "I did," Mason said, ruffling his hair. "You're stuck with me for the whole day, kiddo." The day unfolded like a page from a storybook. They drove with the windows down, wind tussling their hair as Liam leaned out to feel the breeze. At the park, Mason threw the football awkwardly. Years behind a desk had made his arm rusty. But Liam didn't care. Every goofy toss, every failed catch was followed by laughter, and that laughter stitched together the frayed parts of their bond. Afterward, they sat on a bench, sweat on their brows and smiles on their faces, licking cones that dripped faster than they could eat. Mason ordered Liam's favorite, chocolate mint with sprinkles, even though it wasn't his own choice. Then, they headed to the arcade where the neon lights flickered, and nostalgic, beeping sounds filled the air. For hours, they lost themselves in battles of air hockey, racing games, and a comically frustrating claw machine that refused to give up a stuffed dinosaur, no matter how hard they tried. But the best part of the day came in the most unexpected moment. As they were walking back to the car under a sky slowly turning tangerine, Liam suddenly spoke. "You know, this has been the best day I've had in a long time." Mason stopped and looked at his son. "Yeah?" Liam nodded. "I didn't think we'd ever get back here. Like back to being us." Mason put an arm around Liam's shoulders as they walked. "I didn't either, and that's on me. But you gave me a chance to fix it, and I'm not wasting it." There was a brief pause before Liam said, "I kept thinking, what if that letter didn't work? What if you read it and still didn't get it?" Mason's face tightened, not in anger but in pain. "I don't know what I would have done if I'd missed that wake-up call. Your words, they shook me. I realized I wasn't just failing as a parent. I was losing the most important relationship of my life." As they reached the car, Mason turned to face his son completely. "Liam, I may never be the perfect dad, but I can promise you this. I will always listen. You don't ever have to feel invisible again." That night, after burgers and milkshakes at their favorite diner, they returned home, exhausted but full in every sense of the word. As Liam changed into his pajamas, he looked around his room. The messy desk, the backpack slouched in the corner, the Lego set still unfinished. And it all felt different now. Warmer, safer. When Mason came in to say goodnight, Liam did something he hadn't done in a long time. He hugged his father tightly, arms wrapped around him without hesitation. Mason was surprised at first, then wrapped his arms around Liam with equal strength. "I love you, Dad," Liam said, his voice muffled against Mason's chest. "I love you too, kiddo. So much," Mason replied. They stood in that embrace for a few more seconds, both silently grateful for this new chapter they were writing together. The past had hurt, and the future would no doubt bring its own storms, but for now, they were together. And that was enough. Later, as Mason turned out the light and closed the door, Liam lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a smile tugging at his lips. He thought about the day, the laughter, the games, the hugs, and realized something he hadn't dared believe in months: his dad was back. Not just physically, but in all the ways that mattered. And now, with the promise of more dad days to come, the ache in Liam's heart was slowly being replaced with something he had missed so dearly: hope. Spring arrived gently, brushing the town with bursts of color and warmth. Trees blossomed, birds returned, and laughter once again echoed through the schoolyard. In Liam's heart, too, the seasons had shifted, from a cold, lonely winter to a spring of hope and healing. It had been 3 months since he had written the letter that changed everything. Since then, his relationship with his father had blossomed into something new, something deeper. They still had their challenges: busy workdays, homework stress, and the occasional miscommunication. But what made the difference now was the effort. Mason showed up, not just physically but emotionally. He remembered little things, like Liam's favorite snack, or the name of the kid who sat beside him in art class. He even signed up to help coach Liam's weekend soccer team, despite having zero knowledge of the sport. It was in these small, consistent actions that Liam began to trust again, to believe that love could survive loss and grow stronger through forgiveness. At school, Liam's transformation hadn't gone unnoticed. His teachers remarked on his renewed focus, his brighter attitude. He volunteered in class more often, smiled more freely, and even made a few new friends. When the principal announced the upcoming Parents in May event, where students would give short speeches about someone who had influenced them, Liam hesitated at first. Public speaking had never been his thing, and the idea of standing in front of a crowd, telling his story, made his stomach twist. But something inside him urged him forward. Maybe it was the memory of that empty seat at the school play, or maybe it was how proud his dad looked during their last Dad Day. But Liam decided he had something important to say. Something real. He didn't tell his father about the speech. He wanted it to be a surprise. For days, he stayed up late scribbling ideas in his notebook, crumpling pages in frustration, until he found the words that felt just right. When the day of the event finally arrived, Liam stood backstage clutching his index cards, heart pounding in his chest like a drum. The auditorium was packed with parents and students. Laughter bubbled, conversations hummed, and stage lights beamed down on the polished floor. Liam peeked through the curtain and spotted his dad in the third row, camera in hand, wearing that awkward blazer he only pulled out for special occasions. Mason caught his son's eye and gave him a thumbs up, completely unaware of what was coming. Liam took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit him like a wave, but he didn't flinch. He stepped up to the microphone, cards trembling in his fingers. He looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some not, and then found the one that mattered most, his father's. Mason was watching him with the kind of pride that made Liam's chest swell. And with that, the fear melted away. "My name is Liam Walters," he began, voice clear but soft. "And today I want to tell you about someone who changed my life. Not all at once, but in the quiet, everyday ways that matter most." The room fell silent, the energy shifting as he continued. "When I lost my mom, I thought I'd lost everything. My world turned gray, and I couldn't find my way back. My dad, he was there, but not really. He was working all the time. I thought he didn't care anymore, and I stopped trying to talk to him." Liam paused, the memory heavy in his throat. "One night, I wrote him a letter. I didn't know if he'd ever read it. I just needed to say how I felt. I told him I missed him. Not the him that paid bills or cooked dinner when he could, but the him that used to laugh and play and make up bedtime stories. I said I didn't want new toys or clothes. I just wanted him back." Mason blinked, stunned. His hands slowly lowered the camera to his lap. People in the audience leaned forward, listening closely. My dad read the letter, and instead of getting mad or brushing it off, he listened. He changed. He started coming home early. He made time for me again. We started something called Dad Day. It's one day every week where we forget everything else and just hang out. We go to the park, build puzzles, bake banana bread, badly, and sometimes we just talk. And slowly the empty space between us started to disappear. Liam's voice grew stronger. "He's not perfect. I'm not either. But he tries. And I've learned that sometimes love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up. It's about being there, even when it's hard. And my dad, he's here now, and I love him for it." There was a moment of stillness in the room, followed by soft applause that grew into a wave. Some parents wiped their eyes. Others nodded in silent understanding. Liam looked at his father again, and what he saw there wasn't just pride, it was love. The raw, honest kind that doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. After the event, Mason rushed backstage and pulled Liam into a hug so tight, it lifted the boy off his feet. "You didn't tell me you were going to speak," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to surprise you," Liam replied with a grin. "Did I do okay?" "Okay. Liam, you did amazing. You just gave the most important speech I've ever heard." They walked out of the school together, the sun beginning to set behind them, casting long golden shadows on the ground. Mason threw an arm around Liam's shoulders, and Liam leaned in, the way he used to when he was younger. "So," Mason said with a smile, "how about banana bread tonight?" "I think I've finally figured out how not to burn it," Liam laughed. "As long as you let me crack the eggs." "Deal." And as they made their way home, father and son side by side, neither of them noticed the sky above glowing a little brighter, as if the world itself was proud of how far they had come.